The mind that once solved complex problems with lightning speed now seems caught in endless loops, replaying conversations from decades ago, analyzing decisions that cannot be changed, worrying about futures that may never arrive. Perhaps you lie awake at 3 in the morning, your thoughts spinning like a broken record player, rehashing regrets and rehearsing anxieties while your body craves rest. You are not losing your mind, you are being invited to finally free it from patterns that have imprisoned it for decades. Today we'll explore 6 profound Buddhist lessons that transform overthinking from a curse of aging into an opportunity for the deepest mental liberation you've ever experienced. The first lesson reveals why overthinking actually intensifies with age, and why this is secretly a blessing in disguise. Throughout your younger years, you were too busy surviving, achieving, raising families, building careers to notice how much energy your mind was wasting on repetitive, useless thoughts. Now, with fewer external demands and more quiet moments, the mental chatter that was always present finally becomes impossible to ignore. This awareness, uncomfortable as it feels, is actually the first step toward freedom. In the monastery where I studied for many years, I learned that what we call overthinking is actually vitakka in Buddhist psychology, the mind's compulsive need to replay, analyze, and control through mental rehearsal. Your aging brain isn't broken, it's finally quiet enough to notice patterns that were always there. Think of how you never hear the refrigerator's hum until the house becomes completely silent. Your thoughts were always this noisy, you just had more distractions drowning them out. This recognition is revolutionary because you cannot change what you cannot see. Now that your mental patterns are finally visible, you have the opportunity to transform them in ways that were impossible when you were younger and busier. The Buddhist teaching is clear. Awareness is the beginning of freedom. When you catch yourself overthinking, instead of getting frustrated, try saying with curiosity, there's that old pattern again. How interesting that I can finally see it so clearly. Your heightened awareness of mental chatter isn't a problem to solve. It's a doorway to liberation that only opens when life becomes quiet, enough for you to notice what your mind has been doing all along. But recognizing the pattern is just the beginning of a much deeper transformation. The second lesson transforms your relationship with past regrets, which often fuel the most torturous overthinking in later years. You replay conversations from 30 years ago, analyze decisions you made decades past, torture yourself with what-if scenarios about paths not taken. Buddhism teaches that this mental torture serves absolutely no purpose except to create suffering in the present moment about events that exist only in memory. The Buddha spoke of cetana, the intention behind our actions. What matters isn't the perfect execution of every choice you made, but the love, care, and wisdom you brought to each decision, given the understanding you had at the time. That mother who worried she wasn't patient enough with her children was doing her absolute best with the emotional tools she possessed then. That person who chose the wrong career path was following the guidance that seemed right with the information available at that moment. I remember sitting with an elderly man who spent hours every day mentally reviewing his parenting mistakes from 40 years earlier. Through gentle questioning, we discovered that beneath the self-criticism was actually profound love for his children and deep caring about their well-being. The overthinking wasn't evidence of failure. It was evidence of a heart that loved so deeply it was still trying to protect and nurture children who were now middle-aged adults themselves. When your mind begins its familiar journey into past regrets, try this transformative practice. Instead of analyzing what went wrong, ask yourself, what was the love behind that decision? What was I trying to protect, nurture, or create? This isn't about excusing mistakes, but about recognizing the caring intention that motivated your choices. Your overthinking about the past often contains precious wisdom about what matters most to your heart. Honor that caring, then gently redirect your attention to how you can express that same love in the present moment. But the mind's torture isn't limited to the past. The third lesson addresses the future anxieties that keep your aging mind spinning with worry about what might happen. Your thoughts race through scenarios of declining health, financial security, burdening your family, facing death alone. These fears feel so real, so urgent, that your mind convinces you that constant mental rehearsal is somehow protecting you from potential suffering. Buddhism reveals this as perhaps the most futile form of mental activity, suffering in advance for events that may never occur. The Buddha taught about bhavanga, the mind's tendency to create elaborate stories about non-existent futures. When you worry obsessively about developing dementia, you create dementia-like suffering right now through mental confusion and anxiety. When you rehearse scenarios of financial ruin, you experience poverty of spirit in the present moment, even if your actual resources are adequate. Your overthinking doesn't prevent future problems, it creates current misery about imaginary difficulties. Think of worry as interest paid on trouble before it comes due, and most of the time the bill never arrives. During my decades in contemplative practice, I've observed that the vast majority of what people worry about never actually happens, and when difficult things do occur, they rarely unfold in the ways our anxious minds predicted. The mental energy spent preparing for disasters that don't occur could have been used for appreciating the beauty and connections available right now. When you notice your mind spinning future catastrophes, try this reality check. Ask yourself, is this actually happening right now, or is my mind creating a scary movie about what might happen? Then deliberately shift attention to something concrete in the present moment, the feeling of air entering your lungs, the warmth of sunlight through the window, the sound of birds outside. Your future will unfold as it will, and you'll meet whatever comes with the wisdom and resources you have then. Borrowing tomorrow's troubles robs today of its peace. But there's an even deeper pattern of mental imprisonment that Buddhism can help you recognize. The fourth lesson reveals how the aging mind becomes trapped in what Buddhists call papanka, the mental proliferation that turns simple observations into complex narratives of meaning. You see your neighbor talking to someone else, and your mind immediately creates an entire story about why they're avoiding you. You feel tired one afternoon and spiral into fears about your overall health declining. A family member seems distant, and you construct elaborate theories about what you might have done wrong. This mental storytelling was always present, but aging often intensifies it because you have more time to think and fewer external activities to occupy your attention. Your mind, designed to solve problems and make meaning, starts creating problems where none exist and finding meaning in random events. The thought, "I feel tired today," becomes, "I'm declining rapidly and will soon be helpless." A simple headache transforms into, "This could be the beginning of something serious." I once worked with a woman whose overthinking had convinced her that everyone in her family was slowly abandoning her. Through careful examination, we discovered that her evidence consisted of fewer phone calls during a busy holiday season, and one grandson who seemed distracted during a visit. Her mind had woven these normal fluctuations in attention into a complex narrative of rejection and abandonment that existed nowhere except in her thoughts. Buddhism teaches us to distinguish between what actually happens and the stories our minds create about what happens. When you notice your thoughts spinning elaborate interpretations, pause and ask, what actually occurred versus what story am I telling myself about what occurred? Practice returning to simple facts. My neighbor talked to someone else, without the added narrative of, "and this means they don't like me anymore." This isn't denial of real problems, it's freedom from imaginary ones. Your mind will resist this simplicity because it's addicted to complexity, but this resistance reveals just how much mental energy you've been wasting on fictional dramas. Yet perhaps the most liberating discovery comes from understanding the nature of thoughts themselves. The fifth lesson introduces you to the Buddhist understanding that thoughts are not facts, commands, or reflections of reality. They're simply mental events arising and passing like clouds in the sky of consciousness. This insight is particularly profound for older adults, because you've now lived long enough to observe how many thoughts that once seemed absolutely true and urgent turned out to be temporary mental weather patterns with no lasting significance. Remember thoughts that once consumed you completely, worries about children that resolved themselves, career anxieties that led to unexpected opportunities. relationship fears that either worked out or led to better connections. Your mind presented each worry as factual information requiring immediate attention and action, when they were actually just temporary neural activities, with no more inherent truth than dreams or random images that flicker through awareness. In Buddhist meditation practice, we learn to observe thoughts like watching traffic from a hillside, vehicles appearing and disappearing, but not requiring us to chase after each one or climb aboard. Your thoughts about inadequacy, about fears, about regrets, are not descriptions of reality. They're temporary mental formations arising from conditions like fatigue, loneliness, or habitual neural pathways carved by decades of similar thinking. This perspective is incredibly liberating because it means you don't have to believe every thought your mind produces, and you certainly don't have to suffer over them. When a painful thought arises, perhaps I've wasted my life, or nobody really cares about me, you can observe it with curiosity rather than getting swept away by its emotional charge. Say to yourself, there's that wasted life thought again. Hello, old friend. You can visit, but you don't get to move in and redecorate my inner landscape. Practice this daily. When overthinking begins, imagine your thoughts as soap bubbles floating by. You can observe their colors and shapes without needing to pop them or prevent them from forming. This isn't suppression, it's recognition that you are the sky in which thoughts appear and disappear, not the thoughts themselves. But the ultimate liberation comes from the sixth and most profound lesson. The sixth lesson reveals that overthinking is actually your mind's last desperate attempt to maintain the illusion of control before surrendering into the wisdom of acceptance. After decades of trying to figure out life, predict outcomes, and manage circumstances through mental analysis, your aging mind is finally ready to discover what mystics throughout history have known. The deepest peace comes not from having all the answers, but from being comfortable with mystery. Your overthinking often intensifies before it ends, because the ego mind senses that its reign of mental control is coming to an end. Like a candle flickering most brightly just before going out, your analytical mind may become hyperactive as you approach the natural wisdom of elderhood, the understanding that life is far too complex and mysterious to be figured out through thinking alone. Buddhism teaches that enlightenment often comes disguised as giving up. When you finally exhaust yourself trying to solve unsolvable mental puzzles, when you become tired of the endless loop of analysis and worry, when you recognize that decades of overthinking have never actually solved your deepest concerns, in that moment of surrender, profound peace becomes possible. I remember an 85-year-old student who had struggled with anxiety and overthinking her entire life. One day she came to our meditation group and announced, "I'm done trying to figure it out. I've spent 70 years analyzing everything, and I'm no closer to having life figured out than when I started. I give up." What she discovered in that surrender wasn't defeat but the most profound relief and peace she'd ever experienced. This doesn't mean becoming passive or uncaring about your life. It means recognizing that your essential well-being doesn't depend on your mind's ability to solve every problem or predict every outcome. Some questions don't have answers, some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, and some aspects of life require faith rather than analysis. When you feel your mind beginning its familiar spiral of overthinking, try this ultimate practice. Take a deep breath and say, "I don't need to figure this out right now. I can trust that life is unfolding as it should, even when I can't see the bigger picture. I surrender my need to know everything and rest in not knowing." This isn't giving up on life, it's giving up the exhausting burden of trying to mentally control life. These 6 lessons work together to transform your relationship with your own mind from adversary to friend. You are not your thoughts, you are not your worries, you are not your mental analysis. You are the aware presence that can observe all mental activity with compassion and wisdom. Your aging mind isn't failing you, it's finally offering you the opportunity to transcend the mental patterns that have limited your peace for decades. The overthinking that feels like a curse of aging is actually your mind's graduation ceremony, The moment when you finally become wise enough to stop believing every thought and peaceful enough to rest in the spacious awareness that has always been your true nature. Your later years are not meant for mental torture, but for mental freedom. You've earned the right to let your mind rest from its decades of problem-solving and analysis. You've earned the peace that comes from accepting what cannot be changed and trusting in life's essential goodness, even when you can't understand its mysterious ways. If these teachings have brought you even a moment of mental peace, I invite you to like this video and share it with others who might be struggling with overthinking in their later years. Subscribe for more Buddhist wisdom that honors the unique spiritual opportunities that come with aging. Your comments sharing how you found peace with your own mind might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to find their own mental freedom.